everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning, and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. This is number 119. Today is Wednesday, April 20th, and I'm checking in here with my good friend AJ in Barcelona, Spain, ready to share some news and updates from around the travel hacking world, and also an excellent interview with a miles and points expert. How's it going, AJ?
Going well, man. Yeah, I'm definitely excited for the people to hear this interview. I was not on the call with you, but you said she's quite knowledgeable about points and miles. Really a true expert, a true pro.
Yeah, this is going to be a cool episode for folks that have been sort of following points and travel hacking for a while. I definitely learned at least 2 or 3 new things that I completely did not know beforehand. And Tiffany's just a really awesome person, did a really nice job of answering some questions in a way I think is really clear and makes it easier to understand some things that sometimes can feel really complicated when you're just getting started. So I think this is going to be super helpful for both the advanced folks out there and the folks just getting started. And we've also got some interesting news and updates to go over before we get to that. All the show notes for today's episode are going to be at abroaders.com/funk. Like the music, F-U-N-K, and there's a lot of links here. Tiffany was nice enough to share some really great resources that she uses both for earning and redeeming miles, so we're going to be sharing those as well as links to all the information that we're going to cover here in news and updates.
Before we get into news and updates, there's something I want to extend to our community, and I hope this is okay with you because I haven't even ran this by you or George, but for any entrepreneurs that are going to be in Barcelona or any folks out there that will be coming to Barcelona and have a little bit of work to do, we've got a pretty cool setup at a co-working space called Cloud Co-working. So if you're going to be in town for a couple of days and you want a spot to work, I would highly recommend working there. Or if you're not going to be here that long, we've got office space there. So feel free to join us and just come work alongside us if you're going to be in Barcelona and have some shit to get done.
Yeah, at the moment we've got the place for at least the next month and a half, 2 months, and pretty cool co-working space all around. Really nice setup in the sense that it's kind of an open floor plan. There's a lot of space to sort of not feel like you're crammed into a cubicle, and just really nice to be able to get out of the house and work from a different spot. Barcelona is a really cool city, and I think that having a separate office from our apartment here is definitely going to pay big-time dividends for us. And it's a cool way to meet people, hopefully some people that are passing through and stop by.
I think there's some pretty interesting people there, and I was talking with the owner yesterday, and it's pretty cool. One of the architects of Sagrada Familia works from that co-working space. As an architect, depending on your personal style, that's pretty damn prestigious.
Elite. It's definitely elite. So for those of you who are not familiar with Sagrada Familia, the project started like over 100 years ago, maybe over 150 years ago. The original design was by Gaudí. And so he's super famous here in Barcelona, and he basically just knew he wasn't going to get the job done because it was so ambitious, the technology of the day. He knew it wasn't going to happen, so he left a roadmap to continue building this structure, this incredible church. And so they're still building today now with the benefit of cranes and lots of modern stuff that Gaudí probably wouldn't have even thought up. But pretty cool place to check out in Barcelona, and interesting to be close and sort of have a second degree connection with one of the folks responsible for how it turns out.
Yeah, man, absolutely. What do you say we move on to some news and updates, and we can get this kicked off with some fairly good news, which is always nice to report. So Citi Prestige is going to have better purchase and travel protection, and that is going to begin May 15th.
Okay.
A couple things here that are the changes, the improvements is previously a partial payment was not enough to be protected with travel and with your travel protection, and now a partial payment on the card, you are entitled to those protections that you previously were not covered.
So in other words, if you, let's say, book an award ticket and you pay the taxes and fees, but you don't pay the full price of the ticket. So
precisely, exactly. Okay. Some other things are the extended warranty coverage that adds an additional 24 months on top of the manufacturer's warranty. Purchase protection has also gone from 60 days to 90 days. And then the Citi Price Rewind benefit has increased from $300 to $500 per item. and that's a cap of $2,500 a year.
All right, so just to break down the benefits, these are pretty typical benefits, but it is definitely true that the Prestige has made these a bit more generous than a lot of the other cards that are also in the market. So the extended warranty basically covers everything that the regular warranty does for an extra year in most cases. So most cards, if your warranty is 1 year, you get an extra 1 year on top of that. Citi has now bumped that to 24 months, so an extra 2 years for anything that would have triggered a manufacturer warranty claim. You can still use the card and get protection for that. So that's definitely big, especially with those products. I hate to say this about Apple, but every charger that I've ever purchased from Apple breaks like 5 days after it's out of the 1 year warranty. So that can be a big win. And then the rewind benefit, that's something I think that's somewhat unique to Citi. Basically, if you buy something and then find out that the price dropped a little while after, they'll reimburse you for the difference. And so it looks like they've just upped the amount. I can't imagine really seeing like a price $500 less unless you're buying something pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know you got that protection. And so that's something that you don't really have to worry about comprehensively doing the price search. If somebody rubs a big sale in your face later on, you can always get Citi to pay the difference.
Yeah, man. Moving on, we've got a Delta award sale.
Yeah, and this one is pretty urgent. So this show's airing on the 20th, and the last day, at least as far as Delta has announced, is the 21st. So you've got until tomorrow to take advantage. Bottom line here is we've got big discounts on business class award tickets to Europe from the US. And there's two things that make this significant. Number one is that a lot of these routes include at least 2 and sometimes 4 business class tickets, which is pretty rare.
That is not the norm.
It's very hard. I mean, it's a lot easier if you're traveling by yourself. Getting business class availability for 2 on the route you want can be a struggle. It looks like a lot of routes from the US to Europe are opened up for 3 or more business class seats. So that's good in and of itself. And then the other thing is that the mileage amount required is reduced pretty significantly. So instead of in the 60 to 70,000 point range, you're looking at something in the 45 to 50,000 point range.
That's prime time.
Yeah, so that's going to be a nice win. You need to book before the 21st or on the 21st is the last day. So make sure you move quick. And keep in mind that with Delta bookings, this award sale is only on Delta Metal. So that means that no Air France, none of their SkyTeam partners are eligible. You need to book Delta-operated flights with the Delta DL flight number for the sale to kick in. But fortunately, those are pretty easy to search with a big calendar view on the Delta website. So if you've got your route figured out and you're ready to actually confirm travel now, you can easily save a few tens, maybe even 15,000 miles by doing it now.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. This next piece isn't something I'm going to go into too much detail about because it just wouldn't make sense to take up that much time on the news. But Frequent Miler, we'll link in the show notes. They've got a nice post on stacking savings and rewards when you buy a flight. So this is especially nice for people that maybe their credit isn't at a point where they can churn and rack up a bunch of sign-up bonuses, but are still interested in accumulating points and rewards when they buy flights. So it's a pretty nice outline about whether you're buying a flight from a place like Orbitz or through an airline, what you can do to maximize the amount of points you earn. So there's some travel agencies that have their own awards like Orbitz. There's a way to find the cheapest flight, still buy it and earn the maximum amount of points, but also get some Orbitz points that you can put towards hotels in the future. Just a much more savvy way to earn points when you are actually buying a flight. So check out the show notes, brothers.com/funk, and we'll have a link on that. And this is from Frequent Miler.
Yeah, and I think, the big takeaway here, this is definitely something that is for the more hardcore people that are willing to put in a little bit of extra time. But the idea is that you're essentially stacking rewards portals. So every time you've got a situation where one website refers you to another website to buy something, there's some money changing hands behind the scene. And so what some of these portals are doing are rebating some of that money they're making by giving you miles. So essentially, you could go to site X and just buy your ticket, or you could go to site A first and click through to site X and get more points just for them referring you. So that's sort of how it works. If you want to buy something as fast as possible, this is not for you, but it can be worth it. There are definitely situations where you can add, an extra 1,000 points for a few minutes.
And I think it depends how often you travel too. If you're traveling all the time, this stuff adds up. And there's another benefit where once you get familiar with stacking these rewards, it'll be easier and faster for you. If you travel a bunch, it may make sense to at least look into, spend 10 minutes, read the blog post, and make a decision if it's something you want to move forward with.
Absolutely. So staying with paid flight purchases for a second, I've got two really important tools that I wanted to share. This is also pretty advanced stuff. And I was inspired to add this to the show today based on an article by the Points Guy talking about how multi-city itineraries are being priced. And so a lot of websites, and in particular the way that the airlines are filing fares, is that often a multi-city itinerary. So let's say, for example, JFK to Chicago, stop for a few days, onwards to Los Angeles, and then back to JFK. That set of 3 flights could be much cheaper to buy one at a time. In other words, JFK to Chicago, then separately in a different transaction, Chicago to LA, and then separately LA to JFK back.
Right.
And so the key thing here is that the airlines just know that some people are lazy. They're going to search all 3 at once and never bother to see what the single prices are. The article is worth checking out just to sort of see what I'm talking about. The difference can be hundreds of dollars, even up to $1,000 on some of the more advanced and higher price itineraries.
Really quick though, let's talk about some risks to chopping up these flights. If you're saying that you can find the same airline those flights for a better deal.
Yep.
But if you do break up and piece together a multi-city itinerary and you're leaning on an American flight and then a Delta flight, you could be out of luck if there's a tight connection and you miss a flight.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that you want to be aware of. So this doesn't take you to the level where you're intentionally skipping flights, which is something that like skip lagged and one of the other tools I want to share. That's essentially throwaway ticketing, where you're buying an extra flight to reduce the total cost and throwing it out. Now, what you're talking about here, if you actually intend to travel all of the legs, but you buy them on separate record locators, you buy them in 3 separate purchases, Delta being late isn't necessarily American's problem on the next leg. So you definitely want to use a rewards credit card that has purchase protection, travel insurance protection for those delays, so that in the event that your trip is interrupted by being late or something that is caused by one airline and the other airline doesn't want to pick up the bill, the credit card should protect you. So it's definitely something to look into. But frankly, in some of these examples, we're talking about $500 in savings.
Yeah, definitely worth it.
Certainly worth taking a look at. The other thing that I wanted to share, and I'm just going to refer you guys to a couple of links that we're going to have in the show notes, but Secret Flying, which is a great website just for fare alerts on mistake fares. So if you choose regions that you want to travel to, they've got cheap fares coming out every day on their RSS. And they shared an internal tool that they use to find a lot of these cheap fares. It's called the fuel dumping tool. And essentially what it does is takes out that YQ, that fuel surcharge, that the airlines tack onto the price of the ticket by manipulating your route. And it's definitely some extra work, but there are scenarios where you can cut $300 to $500 off of the ticket just by adding an additional leg. It's just, the airline pricing is so confusing and so dense. This tool is not super easy to use. So I'll say that right away. It involves using ITA Matrix, which is a little bit less friendly than Google Flights, but is the same back-end engine. And it involves sort of figuring out what nearby airports you could add an extra flight to, and then looking at a bunch of prices and seeing if it makes it cheaper. So if you're looking for a paid trip and saving money is important, it's definitely worth a look. And I find it pretty interesting just to sort of see what the airlines are doing. To me, it's sort of the same concept as this issue of them pricing 3 individual flights as a group and charging you way more than the individual segments.
Right.
It's all part of that game of them just trying to maximize the value that they can get out of the customer, that classic price discrimination. And so if you can get out in front of it with some of these tools, more power to you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. One thing I want to share in the spirit of bringing things back down to earth and simplifying things a little bit, for those people that have a lot of credit cards, or maybe you're using different credit cards for different purchases because of bonus categories, and paying your bill is a pain in the ass, you can sync up your credit card bills to be due on the same date. So you're not tracking multiple dates. There are some exceptions. Bank of America, for example, you can't. But for the cards that typically we would recommend to people, and you guys have, American Express, Chase, Barclays, you can change the due date of your bill and you can sync that up so you're not worrying about 3 or 4 different due dates for cards.
Yep. And I think, number one, mint.com is a free, really useful tool so that you can see your transactions for a bunch of cards without logging into the bank website. So that's another thing to take a look at as far as sort of organizing your group of credit cards. And I definitely recommend using AutoPay, even if you do want to take a look and review your statement and make sure everything's right, which you should definitely do. One of the things that can help, whether your bill due dates are the same day or lots of different days spread out throughout the month, at least set up that minimum payment so that you're always paying. You don't damage your credit by getting sidetracked.
Yeah, because there is a little bit of risk to having an auto pay to pay in full. If there is something fraudulent, now you're talking about dealing with a couple different financial institutions.
Yeah, generally the credit cards, if you dispute a charge, the federal law is that they have to give you the money back while they're investigating. So you're probably not at too much of a risk of being sort of put over the barrel about
but if your checking account pays the credit card, then what happens? Then the credit card would pay back your checking account?
Yeah, they just give you the money on your card, so it's going towards the other purchases. Assuming you've got some sort of volume on there, that money will go straight into knocking off other legitimate purchases until the thing gets resolved. But I think the bottom line here is that this is something that not everybody's aware. They kind of think, well, the due date that gets issued to you when you open the card is sort of the due date. And so if you want to simplify, maybe you're thinking about doing another round of applications and really hating the idea of having to keep track of another payment due date. Get this set up so that you move all those dates to the same day or maybe the same week, so you kind of know when you got to take care of all your credit card bills. And if you don't want to look at it at all, set up that auto pay and know that at least the minimum payment is going to be transmitted automatically from your bank account. My personal preference is to just have the full balance, and then I just review at the end of the month, make sure nothing crazy happened.
Keep that credit tight but right.
All right, we're almost through to the interview, but we got a couple more news items that I think are worth mentioning. Starwood Preferred Guest has added Virgin America as the 35th transfer partner. So I don't think that the Virgin American program is super elite. It's definitely got some niche purposes, got some good reasons, but it never hurts to have access to converting one type of mile into the other. I also am going to just post in the show notes a link to transfer time estimates for SPG, because unlike Amex, Citi, and United and Chase Ultimate Rewards, you're not going to see very many instant transfer times with Starwood. Some of them are as good as 24 hours. Some of them can be a lot worse. So there's going to be a link to show the transfer times, and Virgin American now a 1-to-1 transfer partner with SPG.
Good stuff. And a quick reminder, show notes at abroaders.com/funk to find all the links from the news we provided today.
Okay, so before we jump to the interview, I did want to get into one listener question. Big thanks to Wesley for sending this question in by email. So I'm going to summarize a little bit, but basically Wesley is planning a honeymoon with his fiance to an all-inclusive type place. They want to go to Australia, and they're looking for business class. So they're looking for business class from the U.S. to Australia. And Wesley has both the Chase Sapphire Preferred and Chase Freedom card, and he's already accrued a total of 115,000 Ultimate Rewards points. And so the core question here is basically, where should they go and how should they decide which of the two of them applies for cards to be able to help build up that collective sort of team balance together to be able to get a round trip to Australia? Now, if they transfer the Chase points to United, which is probably going to be the best option, they're looking at 80,000 points each way in business class per person. So they're still about 45,000 points short. That would definitely say that an easy win there is to either have one of them get the Chase Inc. business card and get a 60,000 point bonus for 5,000 spend, or have the other person, so Wesley's fiance, get the Chase Sapphire card and be able to pick up the extra points, another 50,000 points. And then even though Wesley has his own Chase Sapphire, he can be added as an additional card holder to her account and get an extra 5,000 bonus. So there's 55 on the table. That would cover them both one way in business class. The next question is, and this is good because they're planning pretty far ahead. They're looking at this trip in 2017. So they've got at least, let's say, 8 months to be able to get ready to get the right points. What do you think as far as after they top up the Ultimate Rewards to the point where they've got enough for one-way round trip, what do you think the next currencies should be?
I don't know. We've chatted about this before, and SkyTeam is okay to Australia, And if you're going to look at it that way, you're looking at gobbling up some Delta points and Amex points because it's going to be pretty damn tricky to get just exclusively Delta points to get enough for 2 people in business class. Thing that's a little bit scary about SkyTeam, they've got good availability, but their pricing can be a little bit erratic, and it's not, unusual for Delta to ask for over 100,000 points on the business class on particular dates. So I guess you want to make sure you take a peek at the dates and maybe even consider if business class is important, maybe being flexible on the honeymoon dates a little bit. But with that, I mean, you can definitely get there with Delta, with them both accruing some Delta points and Amex points. But I think the main thing here would be is I wouldn't put too much of my spend towards bonuses beyond getting to that 160,000 points on United. So they're chasing 45,000 points for them both to get a flight in business class. And using any extra spend or any other cards to earn United points or Chase points, I think is wasted spend, because you want to, as soon as possible, get working on Amex and Delta, because it is going to be a little bit of a tall order getting them both enough points for business class. So, I mean, they're one card away from getting there on United and then instantly move on to Amex and Delta.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I mean, first of all award availability is relatively crappier to Australia than most of the other regions of the world from the U.S. So we're talking about kind of a tough redemption in the first place. I definitely agree with you. I think you start with Amex if you can, because there's always a chance to sort of pivot with Amex in the sense that they've got partners in
you start with Delta, you're hitching your wagon to Delta. That's a good
exactly.
point. Yeah.
So, knowing that you're going to travel together, the minimum points are roughly 160,000 best case scenario of sort of having critical mass. So if you start with Amex and then you find out that just Delta's not going to work, maybe the offers don't go back up to 50,000. The timing is pretty key. So I would say, I know there's a membership rewards gold card that's 50K that's targeted. Right now, the public offer is 25K Amex points. So if you can find one of those targeted ones, I would go for sure and grab the one of the cards that earns ultimate rewards to top up that account, because the Chase Sapphire is at an all-time high right now. And the Chasing Plus is also a little bit better than normal. So I think that's probably step number one. As far as distribution, he mentioned that his fiance doesn't have awesome credit, so it probably does make sense to start soon. At least attempt 1 or 2 applications for her and see how those go. Call reconsideration, because certainly having 2 people with the ability to apply for cards, if a big 100,000 point Amex bonus, like targeted offer comes up like it did last August, they can both get that card and be pretty much all set.
One thing I will say that I would be cautious of here is make sure that you don't jump the gun. Having 115,000 points in your United account or your whatever, having splitting 115,000 here and 115,000 there, that does them absolutely no good. Pretty sure they want to fly on the same plane. They're on their honeymoon. Like, you make sure you at least close one of those loops first. So I wouldn't do anything until I'm confident I get to critical mass or get to the amount needed to book with one of them, or at the very least, just the worst case scenario is you earn a bunch of points in 2 different currencies and you can't quite use them.
Yep. Last thing to be aware of for this particular scenario, they're in a good position in that they are planning to get married to be able to transfer points back and forth. But
Correct.
Technically, United says that you need to be a spouse to transfer points to someone else's ultimate rewards account. So one thing to be aware of is that doing this totally within the rules is going to require them to book the award ticket out of one United account. So in other words, Wesley is probably going to have to transfer all of his ultimate rewards points to his United account and book the tickets for both of them. So that's one issue that's potentially a problem if she's the one that gets the Sapphire card to put them over the total amount. I don't think the Chase website is enforcing that in any way, like upload your marriage certificate, but just be aware that's their policy. You transfer your Chase Ultimate Rewards to your own flying account with the partner airline, and you're not supposed to transfer or share ultimate rewards except within a family.
So let's come back full circle real quick. Wesley, if you're out there listening, here's what we're recommending that you do. We're going to go after some Chase points so you can get your ultimate rewards balance to the point where you guys are both set for Australia, and then start with Amex, like Erik said, which is a really good point, because if you start with Amex, that still gives you the opportunity to possibly pivot as opposed to hitching your wagon to Delta. And the tricky part that it's not like a super direct answer, but a little bit of patience too. I think you want to leave an application here or there for if there's a big targeted offer, because man, think about it if Amex Platinum comes out with another 100K offer, like you said.
Yep. Leave a little room. Have some faith. A lot of times in the spring, you're going to see. I'm expecting to see a couple of big offers jump in the next month or two, and just keep an eye on those blogs. Keep an eye on our podcast for sure, and we'll let you know if any big opportunities come up that you can maybe double your miles by just timing your application.
Yeah, Wesley, thank you for giving us something meaningful to talk about. That's a really good question.
Awesome. All right, let's jump to the interview. This week I had the pleasure of sitting down and talking with Tiffany Funk, who is a writer and editor of the 1 Mile at a Time blog, and is also the head of the Points Pros booking service, which is one of the other options out there besides your friends at Abroaders who can help you use your miles to redeem for travel and save a bunch of money. And Tiffany is an expert in frequent flyer programs, rewards credit cards, and using points for discounts on flights and hotels. I thought that this was an awesome conversation and a really, really enlightening interview. There were multiple things that she told me about today that I did not know prior to our conversation. So I think you guys are going to get a ton of value, and it was just super generous of her to spend some time sharing her knowledge. And so I hope you guys enjoy as much as I did. All right, so first of all, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited as well.
Yeah, so I guess to start off, can you tell me how you got into points and miles in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit twofold. I think the first thing that's worth noting up front is I'm a complete airplane nerd. My dad, my uncles, my grandfather, they're all pilots. So I grew up like in the right-hand seat of a cockpit, and which was fun. So I definitely have that love of flying. And then was probably one of the youngest United premiers ever back in the 90s because I had divorced parents and my dad lived in Hawaii. So we'd be flying back and forth and I would get like op-ups and get to go upstairs on the plane. And that was just the coolest thing. So obviously as an adult, you want to continue to be able to do that. And been pretty fortunate sort of with timing. And my then fiance and I moved across the country right after he graduated from college. And it was like right before the recession, and it quickly became, well, how do we get home or get parents to come and see us and sort of massage that family relationship so that they're not upset their kids just moved all the way across the country.
Sure.
And so that's really where it started for us. So like 2007, which was really lucrative at the time with Southwest and Rapid Rewards 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a lot of free travel that happened then, and a lot of, it's 2 flights to get between DC and Portland anyways, but if you book it as 2 reservations, you get double the credits versus if you book it as a single reservation. And it's just escalated from there. And obviously there's not a lot of domestic travel that happens for us right now anymore. A little bit, but mostly it's international stuff. So
very cool. So what are some of your favorite places that you've traveled internationally in the last year or so?
So I have a huge soft spot in my heart for Sicily. We spend a lot of time there, and it's so different than the Italy of the movies.
Uh-huh.
And I really love that. If you're somebody who likes polish and glamorous, Sicily's maybe not your place, but it's like a really wonderful, like well-worn pair of boots in my mind. Like it's a very sort of rugged, beautiful section of the world, and the people are not outwardly friendly, but are really genuine. There's fascinating history and architecture. You've got like Greek ruins, and it's beautiful. So I love Sicily.
Awesome.
And the islands of Malaysia are another place that people don't go to, but are just insanely beautiful. And again, like a wonderful culture and really friendly people and great places to be.
Yeah, I have to say, Southeast Asia has been just a place that I keep getting drawn back to. I just really, really love the people, and I think that the experience is so much different from Europe or from the U.S. That's kind of been my itch for like the last year. It's a little bit harder with time change and having to be sort of 12 hours off from everybody else, but I think there's some incredible options, and if you're using points and can save a lot on the international leg, you can have an amazing trip for much, much cheaper.
Oh, absolutely. And then those are both places, and I'm sure this is true for you as well, where your options on the ground, you have a lot of versatility. So there are some amazing luxury experiences, or you can do, really cheap things where you're only spending $5, $10 a day. Um, which is nice because I know you travel a lot, and I'm on the road probably 300-ish days a year. So those things definitely add up.
Wow. Well, so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the work that you do at 1 Mile at a Time. I'm a huge fan of the blog. I love your posts. I was actually just reading through the one that you wrote a couple weeks back about Delta and their pricing, and that was something that had been driving me nuts because we had been looking at tickets for our customers, and I had been looking at a couple redemptions on my own. And, basically, we're going to link in the show notes to this post, but Delta is essentially showing the wrong prices, and you go to checkout and then they hit you with this huge increase. So some super valuable content. Can you tell me a little bit about how you started working with 1 Mile at a Time?
Yeah, well, the first thing I have to say is that all the props and kudos for 1 Mile at a Time go to Ben. It's his baby, and he's brilliant and a great friend, and I love getting to work with him because I learn a ton every day. So that has to be my first thing. And yeah, we have been friends for quite a few years. And I work primarily on our travel consulting side. I manage Points Pros and that entire situation. And so then started writing more on 1 Mile at a Time, mostly because Ben was taking that trip with his dad. Mm-hmm. And wanted to have a little bit more flexibility. And he still wants to have content because he really is loyal to his readership and wanted to do that. And so, yeah, it's been fun. I love writing, so I'm glad that somebody finds it useful, especially because I know that some of it gets really deep into the weeds.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's definitely, the sort of thing that you just have to like as sort of a hobby or a passion to really spend enough time to stay up to date on what's going on. But I certainly appreciate it. And I know a lot of our listeners also read that blog and get a ton of value. So definitely appreciate your contribution there as well.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad people are reading. Thank you all.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your schedule in particular with the bookings that you guys do over at Points Pros. How does that work with your travel schedule? Are you generally, traveling and working remotely as you help other people book their travel and figure out how to use points to save?
Yeah, basically. And that's one of the things where, if you're reading things on 1 Mile at a Time, my biggest priority in life is always Wi-Fi. And it's fascinating. It's so cool. I feel like I live in the future, and it's so fun because it just gets progressively better. Mm-hmm. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I can definitely say that, a few of the places I went 5 years ago were it was absolutely impossible to work from. And it does seem like the whole world's going in the right direction for folks that want to work from a location independent place.
Exactly. And it used to be the case that Ben and I really couldn't fly together. The only rare exceptions that we could make would be to fly Lufthansa together because they were the only ones that had consistently had Wi-Fi. Even domestically, it wasn't very good, but Lufthansa had it figured out. So that's opened up a lot of things because we can do things now like go on mileage runs to Beijing, and it's fine. It's shocking fine.
It's definitely the worst feeling in the world when you don't. AJ and I are also sort of like that. I mean, my partner and I travel quite a bit. We're often on opposite sides of the world, but there's always sort of somebody's responsible for being connected to the internet someplace at any given time. So definitely looking forward to improved Wi-Fi on flights and more of those developments that make it easier to work from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just us who are, doing this crazy virtual business. There's a lot of people who really value that. And I love that brands are recognizing that and making it a priority.
Absolutely.
Changing my quality of life.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your favorite programs. And in particular, if there's one hotel and one airline program that you think have done the best all-around job of earning your business and rewarding you for being a loyal customer.
Ooh, okay. So for hotels, I split my loyalty between Starwood and Hyatt just because Hyatt doesn't really have a big enough footprint for everywhere I want to go. And Starwood, the fact that you can earn points on multiple rooms is really nice. I'm frequently traveling. I feel like I'm traveling either by myself or with a circus. because either it's just me, or if I do have the opportunity to travel somewhere, I'm frequently traveling with like my nieces and their teenagers. And so like it gets big. We took a trip to Thailand over Christmas and New Year's where, we had 7 of us. So I really appreciate that from Starwood and Starwood Properties. Left to my own devices, and this is the eternal conflict of miles and points people, left to my own devices, I would probably stay like in boutique properties and I would sort of leverage that. But for using points, Hyatt and Starwood are working well for me.
Yeah, I've definitely had some nice experiences at those properties. It is a little bit hard. I don't have any Hyatt credit cards, and so transferring Chase to Hyatt is always a little bit painful when those miles could be United miles or Korean miles instead. But they have some amazing properties, and at least until recently, there's been some good values. Like the one in Sao Paulo, I think was only like 5,000 or 8,000 a night, and it was like an incredible place. So I imagine if you look hard enough, and there happens to be a Hyatt where you're traveling, there's probably some pretty nice options.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, the other thing is that, I am an SPG Platinum and a Hyatt Diamond. So I do pay for a lot of hotels because those pay stays they're paid. So I do leverage things like the 4th night free when you book with the Citi Prestige.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Hyatt properties will also be Virtuoso or Amex FHR. And especially when I'm traveling solo in a new city, I like having that option of like, I have this food and beverage credit at my hotel and I'm only in the city for a little bit of time. And if I don't feel the vibe of the city and I don't feel safe going out, then I have, almost like an excuse, or it's okay, or I don't feel so guilty about hanging out in the hotel bar.
Yeah, interesting.
So I do like that, especially as a solo female traveler. Because
sure.
I don't actually ever drink by myself outside of the hotel when I'm traveling, just because the world is scary.
Makes sense.
Or can be.
Can be. Definitely can be. And also, I'm not sure if everybody caught that, but the FHR is Amex's Fine Hotels and Resorts. That's something I actually haven't used before. Has that been pretty valuable? It seemed like, it was sometimes a big trade-off of like you end up actually paying a lot more than you could get for that hotel. Have you been successful with that?
Oh my gosh. So the Virtuoso rate, I don't know if people use Virtuoso, but it's like a consortium of travel advisors, and hotels actually pay a fee to be a Virtuoso hotel. And you get, with both Virtuoso and Amex FHR, you get breakfast, either a continental or a full breakfast. You get technically a room upgrade, upon availability at check-in, blah, blah, blah. And then generally like $100 worth of amenity. And sometimes it's spa credit, sometimes it's food and beverage credit. Sometimes it's like a car transfer, which seems useless until you look and see what, how else you'd get there, those types of things. The Virtuoso rates are almost always within a few dollars of the best available rate. Sometimes it'll be like $10 or $15 more, but they're always very close. The FHR rates are generally also very close, sometimes a little bit more. But like a great, easy example, I'm going to Las Vegas in a couple of weeks for the Freddie Awards, and I'm speaking at FTU. And I booked a hotel in Las Vegas they're generally not expensive anyways, because it's Vegas. So I booked a hotel it's $118 through FHR, but that includes $100 food and beverage credit, plus breakfast for 2 up to $60, plus a room upgrade, plus late checkout.
Well, I must have just had terrible luck. I probably looked at 2 or 3 of them and I was like, oh, this is crap. It's like $80 cheaper on another site. So, well, that's definitely good to know.
Yeah, so it definitely depends. And sometimes you can do better by, booking through an OTA and, doing the best rate guarantee thing. But FHR and Virtuoso rates count as though you'd booked through the hotel program directly. So if you're interested in earning elite credit and getting your points, it's maybe worth that little bit of a price premium versus booking on like hotels.com or something.
Totally makes sense. Awesome info. That's very, very helpful. I wanted to ask you a little bit about premium cabin, and I get really surprising answers sometimes from folks that are super into points and miles. I've been surprised that a lot of people I've talked to end up opting to fly economy a lot more than I would expect, and so I'm curious about your take on that for long haul and short haul. How do you decide whether you're going to use points for business or first or economy? and if you have any airlines that are your favorites in terms of the in-flight product.
Okay, so I never fly economy internationally. And it's not like I feel like, oh, I'm too good for economy or I would die or anything ridiculous and dramatic like that. I just find it unnecessary. And, I don't want it to sound arrogant, but it's pretty easy once you've gotten, knee deep in this game to be accumulating more miles and points than you can reasonably use in a reasonable amount of time. And I have been playing long enough to have some pretty significant balances and to, want to leverage them for premium cabins, especially when there's economy fares that are so cheap. You see all the time, you can fly to Asia frequently for $400 or $500 in economy. Like, why would you redeem miles for that? That's, that math doesn't make sense to me. Unless you're using like a cashback card or something like that, and then it could make sense for you. But I'm also an executive platinum on American, so I do have those system-wide upgrades, which I will sometimes use on a cheap economy fare, but I never use miles for economy. Never, never, never. In terms of business or first, if it's just me, business is fine. If it's just me, I will choose business class with Wi-Fi over first without.
I definitely would agree with you on that.
If it's just me, because then I'm more pleasant when I get on the ground because I haven't spent the whole flight anxious and worried.
Wondering what's happened.
I have these internet businesses, and there's a lot to keep. There's so much to keep up with and keep on track of, and there's not a lot of wiggle room. Like if I go that 16-hour flight without Wi-Fi, that's like 40 hours of catch-up time.
For sure.
But if I'm traveling with my husband, I try and he doesn't fly as often as I do anymore, just because of his life situation. So if we're traveling together, I try and make it first because the mileage premium is traditionally not much higher.
Generally not so bad, and especially if you know your programs and have your points somewhat well diversified. There's usually a good way to get the business or first class for less than some of the other potential options would be. So if you spend a little bit of time, I definitely agree that you can get some pretty cool redemption options and not spend that many more points to be in business or first class.
Right. And I think that's actually key, and we can talk about this a little bit more, is having a sense of what it is you're going to want to do and letting that sort of inform your mileage accrual.
Sure. Yeah, let's dive into that, because I think that's probably the most common question that we get asked, and one of the core things that we're building in our app to try and help people make good choices at the beginning to pick the right points or sort of align their strategy overall with their travel goals. Do you have some tips or maybe a checklist that you advise people to kind of think over before they just dive in and get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a broad question, but then it has to become a specific question for you is, what are your travel goals? And for some people, it's like they really want to shower on an airplane, and that's great. So then everything that you do has to be geared towards that. And, with something like that, you want to earn quickly so you can redeem quickly because these things change quickly.
Sure.
So if your goal is something like that, if your goal is the broader, I want to be able to fly premium cabins. We take one vacation a year, and so I want it to be really nice and really luxurious. Then think about where it is you want to go and dig in a little bit. You don't have to become an expert, but just get a general sense of, okay, I really want to go to, let's just say Europe, because that's very, very common. I want to be able to go to Europe. I want to be able to go to every year because I want to be able to take these anniversary trips. And I want to fly business class. What are my most realistic options? Not just what are the most aspirational options, because obviously if we could all fly exclusively Lufthansa first class to Europe, that's what we'd all be doing. But that's not always the most practical. But it could be practical. It depends on your situation. And then sort of look and get a sense of it. I'm in California, and I talk to clients all the time where they have a British Airways credit card, they got that companion pass, and now they're devastated because there just isn't British Airways first class availability from California to London.
Yep.
Ever. until, I mean,
We've noticed that as well.
I literally, this is what I do for a living. There just isn't space. There's sometimes space for one, but realistically, there's not space for two where you can use your companion pass until maybe 4 days before departure. And it's pretty consistently there the week before departure, but otherwise finding two seats in first is a needle in a haystack. So then you have to think about that. Like, okay, this could be a pretty good value. Is that something that you're willing to do? Do you want to book business class and then gamble on the upgrade and flying first, just within a couple days of departure? If you definitely want to fly first and you definitely are okay with paying fuel surcharges, then there are better places for you to be accruing points than with British Airways.
Absolutely.
So things like that, even though it's a good deal on paper.
Well, let's talk a little bit. I know you have a ton of experience because of Points Pros and the booking service. Let's talk a little bit about award availability as it stands now, in particular for business and first class. What programs do you think are the best and the worst at the moment?
Okay, so it's very destination specific.
That's true. I guess maybe we should frame it that way too, because
and it goes back to the first thing of like, what are your goals? Because that really, really depends, and that really informs the entire conversation. It's very different. People who want to go to India, it's a completely different conversation than people who want to go to South America. So, given that, a very broad thing would be if you have an option in 2016 and early 2017, really the next 12 months, to redeem away from One World, I would focus on that. It'll get better, but just this combination of the U.S. Airways miles, which were so plentiful, and merging into the American miles, which are also so plentiful, means award space on One World is rough. There is not a single first class seat I have seen on Cathay Pacific from North America to Hong Kong through the end of the schedule.
Yeah.
There's zero. So it's not even like, there's not two. On a flight, there's just none on any flights, any days. And that's changing, and they're going to open up space. But both U.S. Airways miles and American miles were so easy for non-savvy people to accrue. Mm-hmm. And, especially the savvy people. I mean, we've all been ridiculous with those. So we had so many people come to us, and they're normal people. They don't read blogs. They don't listen to podcasts. They live in Dallas, and they have like 4 million Advantage miles because they've been using their Advantage card since the 90s, and booked a lot of travel because they heard about this devaluation because it's making mainstream media because so many people have Advantage miles. So it's just availability is really, really tight. So if you can get away from those, for the next year, I think that you're going to be more successful in finding award space.
Yep. And that's maybe less, I guess the one thing you would maybe say is if you already are in that position where you have a lot of those miles, it probably makes sense to give it a check and see if you can find business class, or in that case where maybe you're willing to do business and potentially wait for the last couple of days to upgrade and possibly get a chance at first. If you've got the miles already, great if you can use them, but if not, you really want to be diversified and have some points with SkyTeam or with Star Alliance.
Right, exactly. So if you're deciding like which credit card should I get first, I would probably get the non-Advantage cards first. You can always get the Advantage cards in like November, December, and then be set up for once this booking window has ended, because it's really just through March 23rd, 2017, where you have space limitations.
Sure. Okay.
So there's that. And then very broad things in general. Business class space on SkyTeam can be very good. Sort of no matter where you're going, except for if you have Sky Miles and you want to go to Australia. That's a really difficult situation right now, which is unfortunate because that's been one of the go-tos over the years. But still good for Asia, great for Europe, my favorite for Europe, honestly.
Yeah, we just actually booked a bunch of people from our team. We've got a couple of the members of our core team that are in Barcelona with us now, and I think all that travel was on SkyTeam, either with Delta or Air France.
Well, and we've redeemed almost 1 billion miles for people over the years, pretty much all at the saver level. And a solid third of those have been through Sky Miles, just because, so many people have American Express points. And I know that it's a very unpopular program. It certainly is causing premature aging for me because of how they operate and how they price and a lot of the nuances to the program. But if you are flexible, Sky Miles can still be really useful. Right now, with the way that they're pricing things, it's probably cheaper for you to position to the international gateway in the US and just avoid Delta Metal. But if you can book 11 months out, availability on Air France and KLM is still fantastic. Their SkyTeam partners are great. You actually almost are at the point where you have to go out of your way to not find a lie flat seat in business class, no matter which direction you're going, whether you're going trans-Pacific or transatlantic, which is, impressive. You can't really say that of other carriers and other alliances.
Definitely agree. I wanted to ask you, as far as positioning to the gateway city, is that mostly an issue of getting a lower tier, like a saver level 1 versus a saver level 3? Or is it also tied into the actual availability of whether there are even seats open for booking?
It's both of those, and then the third thing, which is Karen Zachary, who runs Sky Miles, she comes from revenue management at Delta, which I think really, like, once you know that, it informs a lot of how Sky Miles is evolving. Because if you're coming from revenue management and coming with a history of the airline, the way that traditional award programs work is just mind-boggling. It's like, well, why does it work that way? That doesn't even make any sense. It's completely illogical. And that was basically her impression. Mm-hmm. It sounds like, in looking at Sky Miles, like, well, this is crazy. This is not how you run a business. So I understand her intent and how she's trying to sort of rationalize it and make it make sense in the market. And one of the ways that that's manifesting is that Delta basically has origin and destination pricing now. So once you have more than, you can sometimes get away with it if you only have one segment on Delta, but once your long haul segment is on Delta, then they just feel like the price of going from Atlanta to Tokyo should not be the same as the price of going from Savannah to Tokyo. Like, it just should not be the same. Yeah. Why would it be the same? So that's where the positioning flights come into play, because it may just make sense for you to buy that ticket, or even sometimes it even makes sense to book a separate award.
Sure.
Even if it's still on Delta, even if it's still level 1, the prices don't combine well, and it's just ugly.
Yeah, it seems like they've been a lot more clever. I mean, I certainly respect the folks that are driving the IT forward progress for Delta, because it sucks if you have the points, but it is truly really impressive that they dynamically change prices based on where you're coming from. It does seem like it's one of those programs that it really does pay off to search multiple city pairs, look at the routes, and figure out how you could get to that place, and then spend a little bit of extra time to actually look at those prices. And hopefully the website is being accurate that day, but at least you can sort of see relatively where you might be able to cut one flight off and either buy that as a paid fare, or at a British Airways, Avios, one way on American, to get positioned and be able to save a bunch of points on your outbound flight.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I would add to that, because I know a lot of people are intrigued by business class, but they feel like it's not approachable because they're booking for a family. Delta can actually be a great program for that, because maybe there's only one flight available, especially if you're looking on Delta Metal. So maybe there's only one seat available at Tier 1, but there's a seat on Tier 2, and there's 2 seats on Tier 3. And when you average that out, it's still a reasonable redemption value. We do that a lot for people who want to go to South Africa. Like, not redeeming exclusively at the saver level isn't a sin. It's fine. And if you have a lot of Amex,
if you book those, do those need to be booked as separate itineraries? In other words, will it give you the average between 1 and 2 if you're booking a saver level 1 and a saver level 2, but they're priced out together?
No. So if you search for 4 people, Atlanta to Joburg, you might get 375,000 points apiece, because there's only seats for 4 in like the Tier 4 fare bucket.
Yep. Okay.
But there might be 1 seat at Tier 1 and 1 or 2 at 2 and 1 or 2 at 3. And so then you're bringing your average one-way price down to like 105,000.
Perfect. So to set that up, you just need to get the 1 ticket, and then get the 2 tickets at the second tier, and then get the 3rd ticket.
So that's how I would search. I would search for 1 passenger, search for 2 passengers, search for 3 passengers, search for 4, and you can sort of get the breakdown.
Very cool.
And I book in multiple browsers basically, and book.
No, when you go to actually book that does mean that you end up having to be on separate record locators and potentially exposed to some extra change fees if plans do change, or is there a way around that as well?
Well, with Delta, it doesn't really matter if you're on one locator or four. You're paying the same change
Same
fees,
per
right?
person. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's because it's 150 per person, no matter what you want to do. This is one of those things where
I'm
I
not
have
totally.
to look it up.
That's okay. That's well. That was actually going to be one of my other questions. Was what are some of the resources that you use to just keep track of all of the rules and all of the different prices and sort of do you have any resources either online or ones that you've created offline for yourself that are especially valuable to help you get things done?
Okay, so the thing that I have offline that is super valuable to myself is I've saved the phone numbers for all of these airlines in my phone. And that sounds like a small thing, but it took me like 18 months to figure out that that's something that would make my life better.
Totally.
Um, and so that's been a big thing. But otherwise, like Ben is basically a machine, and he has this page on his blog with like tips and tutorials. He also has a page with loyalty programs and links. So those two basically have like this compendium of like really valuable posts that he's written in the past. And I go there. Like that's pretty much everything that I need is there, especially the loyalty programs and links page, because it has links to all the award charts and how to sign up for the programs and the phone numbers and the hours.
Awesome. I will definitely make sure to get that link in the show notes as well, so that folks can just get there directly and check it out. I know that this is going to be, I think, episode 119, and we've got so many links to this blog just because the information is really good, and it's one of the ones that's more up to date. I think there's a lot of people that do a great job of writing about interesting topics, but if you don't catch it at the time that it's relevant, it often doesn't get updated. And so there's fewer places that you can go, and know that if you're looking at a sort of an aggregated resource that you're finding stuff that's not 6 months out of date and already changed a ton of detail that's going to be important.
Right. So yeah, we do a pretty good job of keeping that updated. I think now I'm going to have to go through and check.
You're going to double check. You got a little bit of time before this comes out. So the last question I wanted to ask you was just sort of about any particular currencies outside of Delta, American, and United, and maybe one of the less known transfer partners of some of the transferable currencies. But are there any spots that you find especially valuable that other people might not have taken a look at?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can even go by alliance. So
okay,
for Star
great.
Alliance, I know that like ANA is really popular in the blogosphere and like for hardcore miles and points people, because their chart is it's
so
cheap
much cheaper. So much cheaper.
Which is really nice. Fuel surcharges can be sort of problematic. Again, it depends. It's a lot of that's carrier dependent, things like that. But yeah, it's a super cheap chart. That's great. The transfer times, and this is one of the other things where, what works in my world is not necessarily what I would recommend to people who are doing this on their own. But like for me, it's really hard to recommend that somebody else you book through ANA because of the transfer lag.
Yes, yeah, there's a little bit of liability. It's only happened to me once where I've actually lost a ticket, that just
right.
somebody else booked.
If it's travel for me, like that's fine. I'll go the next day or the day, I'm flexible. But if I'm booking even for like my parents, they have a really hard time understanding, well, but wait, you were booking this and I don't understand what happened. So I actually love Aeroplan, and it's been, sort of like it went from being this really amazingly, ridiculously lucrative program where you could book with tons of first class with no fuel surcharges, and it was great. But
the good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. But it's still a really great program. They've got really pretty flexible routing rules. They let you have either a stopover and an open jaw or two stopovers on an award ticket, which can be really useful. We leverage that a lot for people going to Europe because they want to go to two cities. They want to go to both London and Rome.
Definitely.
That's very common. And they have enough partners that don't have fuel surcharges that it's pretty easy to keep those redemptions reasonable. And they're great for first class to Europe in terms of like the price, the comparative pricing. So love Aeroplan. It's like an unsung hero. Then on the SkyTeam side, Air France has some good options. They allow holds now, which is great because Flying Blue can literally be the worst program in the world to deal with.
I didn't realize that. What's the hold rule? That's new for me.
Yeah, if you call them, they'll place an award on hold for you while you transfer in your points from Amex. Just tell them that you have to transfer the points in from Amex, which is really useful because they've got some crazy married segment issues. And sometimes things, even if they look that they're going to price online, they don't price online. So I would never transfer points to Flying Blue without holding it first.
Makes sense. Well, that's definitely a good tip.
We've been burned by that too many times. But then the other program I really love is Alitalia. No one has ever said that sentence before. But
this is the first the Brothers podcast brings to you.
Exactly. But it's one of those programs, again, a lot of people, they want to travel with more than 2 people. They want to travel like 4 people. They want to travel over peak dates and those times when award space is really tough. And you don't want to pay for standard awards. Like that doesn't make sense. And Alitalia is a great program for upgrades. Phenomenal. So if you can leverage like a cashback card or some other situation to where you can buy premium economy tickets on Alitalia, it's super cheap to upgrade, and they don't have a separate upgrade bucket for their business class inventory. It's if there's iSpace, which is their lowest revenue business class fare bucket, you can upgrade into it.
Wow, I did not know that either. So if you buy premium economy, and it does have to be premium economy, no economy fares can upgrade like that?
Economy fares can upgrade to premium economy, and it gets complicated, but premium economy on Alitalia is generally
like
it can even sometimes be cheaper than full fare economy.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's worth exploring, and you might be surprised, especially people who want to go to like Umbria and some of these, they're not going to Rome. They want to continue on and look at other destinations where award space is really challenging. It can be a good option.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay,
So
great.
I really like that. And I can send you a link to, I have a really good post on how to use Alitalia miles that.
We would love that. That would be
nobody else.
You're the only one that's treading that really ground.
Cool because if you have, 4 people and you want to go to Venice in the summer, you're probably not finding saver level award space unless you're booking really far in advance. And you might have to take a really inconvenient routing. But if you can fly, from New York or Boston, connect in Rome, easy flight up to Venice, and you can get premium economy for like $1,500, $1,600, especially if you're using your cashback card, then it's, 15,000 points to upgrade.
Yeah, that sounds like a great combo.
Yeah. So we leverage that a lot because it's pretty useful. And then on the One World side, they're depending on where are our listeners? Are they mostly U.S. based?
Mostly U.S. folks. We do have some international folks as well. It always hurts a little bit to not be able to help quite so much on the rewards card and loyalty side. But yeah, definitely majority U.S. but have an international crowd here as well. So
for folks in the U.S., everyone's talked about like British Airways Avios for years in terms of being great for short haul economy. The Iberia program can actually be better if you're in a situation where you'd have to connect. So a great example, I'm in San Diego. If I wanted to go to Las Vegas, there are no direct flights on One World. That would be a pretty expensive redemption on British Airways, even with the old system. But with Iberia, they price it based on the cumulative distance, regardless of the number of segments.
Wow. Okay. So that definitely can take, if you've got a couple of stops, it's just basically instead of taking San Diego to, let's say, LA and pricing that, and then LA to Las Vegas and pricing that and adding them up, it's the full distance and then they determine the price.
Yes. There's some caveats. You can only book round trips.
Okay.
And their partner awards are not cancelable, but like I use these.
So this is a separate partner chart for them, right?
Yep, it's a separate partner chart for Iberia. And just to give an example, I do San Diego, LA a lot, and I fly because I'm positioning to LA basically for international trips where it doesn't really make sense to take the train because,
sure,
if you look at a map of LA, the train station is completely inconvenient to the airport. So it used to be 4,500 British Airways Avios, which was great. Now it's 7,500 British Airways Avios, which is not so great. But the round trip is 11,000 Iberian Avios.
Okay.
And as long as you can sort of plan it so that you're booking a round trip, like that's great. Like it doesn't save you a ton of miles, but it's saving me 4,000 every trip.
Yeah, and that definitely adds up if you use this strategy over time. I also like Iberia on their own flights for long haul, just in the savings on taxes. I was in Medellin, Colombia last year, and I found a British Airways ticket that was pricing out at like $200 or $300 in taxes and fees to get to Spain. And the price with Iberia was like less than $70. And it was the exact same route, exact same flight, just booking through Iberia's website was going to give you a huge discount. So that's maybe something to take a look at as well if you are on either British Airways or Iberia metal to see if the taxes and fees are different.
Yeah, absolutely, because Iberia doesn't levy fuel surcharges or as high of fuel surcharges on their own planes. And it's also important to note that you can transfer points freely between British Airways and Iberia Avios, even though they're separate Avios, as long as your accounts have been open for 90 days. So, what I generally do is I will transfer Ultimate Rewards points to British Airways because Iberia is not a partner, and then from British Airways to Iberia.
Cool.
So
have you used the avios.com feature at all? I never was totally clear on how that part of it worked. I knew that you could move Avios from British Airways to Iberia and vice versa, but are there any special uses for the avios.com points as well?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I know I should know. It's one of those things like I can get you an answer quickly. But
Finally gotcha. That's all I needed.
It's been like 2 years since I've done it, and I'm sure someone on my team has done it more frequently, but they're in the trenches a little bit more than I am lately. So
no worries. All right. Well, I'm glad at least there was something that you didn't know. I was starting to feel like I was just getting a complete education here.
Which I don't know. That's the problem and the great benefit of having an amazing team of people, because I have just these crazy smart people who work for me and with me on all this stuff, and like they're insanely smart and they know ridiculous things and they're doing it every day. And so I catch glimpses of like, wait, explain that to me. And they're like, really, Tiffany? I'm like, yeah. I don't understand. Like, what just happened here? Like, why couldn't you book that? Why could you book that?
Yeah.
So I'm really lucky.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to share your expertise with us. I think this is going to be a really great episode and will certainly help a lot of people out with planning and executing their redemption. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely.
If people want to get in contact with you or learn more, how can they find you?
Of course, I'm onemileatatime.com and I'm there all the time. My handle on everything pretty much is tebfunk, T-E-B Funk. And yeah, you can also do tebfunk.com. It's like a landing page for all of my social media stuff.
Okay, great. And we'll get that all linked up in the show notes so nobody has to remember or work too hard. Thanks again, Tiffany.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
All right, that's it for today's show. Thank you all for being with us. We will be back next week, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard on Wednesday. To play you out today, I've got one of my favorites. It's a Brazilian artist, probably not known by very many people outside of Brazil. His name is Armandinho, and the track is Pescador. It is a great song. I hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you next week.
My brother não vai entrar nesse mar. Não vai, não. Hoje vamos ter que ver o surf da beira. Tem rede no mar.
Hey brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.
Se você vê que o mar tá bom, só quero meu cantinho pra surfar. Sou pescador, é paz e amor, cuidado com essa rede no mar. Se você vê que o mar tá bom, só quero meu cantinho pra surfar. My brother, não vai entrar nesse mar. Não vai, não. Hoje vamos ter